I think for so many people living with a condition like diverticulitis, there's this one central anxiety that just hums in the background all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's that worry, of not knowing whether the discomfort you're feeling is just a bad day, maybe just a random digestive upset,
Yeah.
or if it's the actual start of a serious flare-up.
Right. Is this something I need to act on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that constant uncertainty, that feeling of being on high alert, it's just exhausting.
It really is.
So today we're going to try and cut through some of that noise. Our mission for this deep dive is really specific. It's focused purely on awareness,
Yeah.
on learning to listen to those subtle shifts your body sends when inflammation is just starting. And to be really clear, we are deliberately not going to discuss treatments or specific diets or medications.
No, this is all about pattern recognition.
It is giving you the tools to replace that panic
Yeah.
with informed and calm observation.
And that observation really has to start with clarity. So for anyone who's new to this or just needs a quick refresher,
Yeah.
we're talking about diverticulitis. First, you have diverticula, which are these small sort of balloon-like pouches that can form on the wall of the colon. Just having them is called diverticulosis, and honestly, it often causes no symptoms at all.
Right. Many people don't even know they have it.
Exactly. The shift to diverticulitis is the key here. That's the specific period where one or more of those pouches get irritated or inflamed, sometimes even infected, and that inflammation is what we're tracking today.
Got it.
And of course, the crucial disclaimer we always have to make, this conversation is for general education and awareness. It is not, and it really can't replace, professional medical advice.
Absolutely.
If you're experiencing severe pain, if your symptoms are getting worse very quickly, or you have a high fever, a medical evaluation is absolutely necessary.
Yes, of course. But here's the real benefit of mastering this knowledge for you, the listener. When you understand the map of your own early warning system, it just reduces that anxiety so dramatically. Instead of guessing and panicking, you can approach the situation with knowledge. And that supports, calmer, faster, and just better decisions. That's real empowerment.
Yeah, it puts you back in the driver's seat.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have to start with the early shifts. Those signals that are so easy to dismiss because they're so quiet. They don't scream for attention.
Right, they're subtle.
So how do we learn to differentiate that background noise from the first flicker of a warning light? If we look at the earliest physical cue, it's often a type of discomfort. But how would you describe the difference between that initial subtle ache and the sharp pain people often think of?
That distinction is just vital. The initial signs are almost never that sharp, acute pain. They usually come on as a dull, persistent ache, or maybe a heavy internal pressure.
A pressure.
Yeah, think of it less like a knife and more like a heavy stone just sitting on your lower abdomen. It's often not crampy, it's just there.
And is there a specific location we should be paying attention to?
Yes, very often. The primary indicator tends to be localized to the lower left side of the abdomen.
Okay, the lower left side.
And the reason for that is because the sigmoid colon, which is the most common site for these pouches, it's right there. But, and this is important, we have to stress that anatomy varies. Some people feel it more centrally or even on the right.
So the key isn't a universal spot, but
It's learning where your consistent pressure point is. That's the core of pattern recognition.
okay. So we've got a dull ache or this persistent pressure. But what about digestion itself? The sources we looked at indicate that bowel habits can shift quite dramatically, sometimes in ways that seem opposite. How can inflammation cause both constipation and looser stools?
That duality is tricky, isn't it? But it really just reflects how the inflammatory process affects the colon's muscle movement, peristalsis.
Okay.
In a lot of cases, the inflamed tender tissue reacts by going into spasm or becoming really irritated, and that leads to slowed transit. In other words, constipation.
So the body's trying to protect itself almost.
You could see it that way. The physical bulk of stool moving past those inflamed pouches is painful, so the body just slows everything down.
Right. But then what about the other side of the coin?
Well, on the other hand, that same inflammation can sometimes trigger excessive water secretion into the bowel or rapid spasmodic contractions, which then results in looser stools or diarrhea.
I see.
So regardless of the direction it goes, the key insight for you is that this change is often accompanied by more bloating, more gas, and just a distinct feeling that your digestion is fundamentally off, like a slow, grinding machine.
That makes perfect sense. It's the overall change, not just one specific symptom. So beyond the purely physical gut symptoms, what about those subtle systemic signs, the ones that are so easy to ignore, that general feeling of being unwell.
Yeah, we hear people describe that as a generalized malaise. They feel unusually tired. And it's not the, I just need more sleep kind of tired. It's a low-grade physical fatigue.
And that often comes with other things.
It's often coupled with mild nausea or a sudden, unexplained aversion to food. You might just find yourself not hungry. Or you can't look forward to a meal you normally love.
Mm-hmm.
So when you put all of these early signals together, the subtle ache, the changing bowel rhythm, the sudden fatigue, it really highlights why we emphasize recognizing your personal normal.
Right.
It's kind of like listening to an orchestra. Most of the time, the music is regular, it's predictable. If the tuba suddenly starts playing just a little bit off key, that's your signal.
I love that analogy.
You aren't checking some universal 7-point list. You are noticing that your personal music is starting to falter.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
But, okay, how do we distinguish between that faint off-key note and a sudden loud crescendo? Let's shift our focus to the next stage, when those subtle signs become more insistent.
Right, when they progress.
This intermediate phase seems critical for knowing when to escalate your self-care or, maybe call your provider.
It is. As the flare progresses, the inflammation is intensifying, so the discomfort moves from that dull ache to a pain that is actively persistent. It's much harder to ignore. You find yourself constantly aware of it, even when you're distracted.
And we move from that general internal feeling to a distinct external sensitivity. Is that right?
Absolutely. One of the clearest intermediate markers is localized tenderness. Where the initial ache was just a feeling, now when you gently press on the lower abdomen in that specific area, it feels sensitive.
Ah, so it's tender to the touch.
Exactly. That tenderness indicates the inflammatory process is now clearly localized and active right in the bowel wall itself.
Our sources also point to a connection between this intensifying pain and eating. Why does discomfort specifically get worse after meals during a flare-up?
This gives us a really deep insight into the mechanism. When you eat, it triggers something called the gastrocolic reflex, which increases peristalsis.
The muscle contractions.
The muscle contractions that push material through the colon, yes. So if the walls of the colon already have these inflamed, tender pouches, increasing the frequency and intensity of those contractions and pushing physical bulk past that area, well, it naturally makes the pain worse.
Of course.
So discomfort that reliably spikes, say 30 to 60 minutes after a meal, is a really strong indicator of an active, progressing flare.
That's incredibly helpful context. So we have persistent pain, tenderness, post-meal spikes. But what's the point where we move from needing more self-awareness to needing immediate professional attention?
The primary systemic red flags are the development of a low-grade fever or chills.
Yeah.
This indicates the body is actively fighting an infection or significant inflammation. It's moved beyond simple irritation. When the pain becomes severe, when symptoms rapidly worsen, or when that fever is undeniable, that's when medical evaluation is paramount. You need to prevent potential complications.
That distinction, the persistent pain combined with a fever, that is the clear line in the sand.
That's the line.
But now, let's pivot to something that I think often confuses people.
Yeah.
This fascinating connection between the digestive system and the nervous system, the gut-brain axis.
Yes.
Why are our digestive and nervous systems so inextricably linked during these periods that we experience emotional or psychological symptoms right alongside the physical ones?
This is where we get into the really deep science. The gut, and the colon in particular, it houses the enteric nervous system. It's often nicknamed the second brain.
The second brain, right.
This system has hundreds of millions of neurons. It operates semi-independently, and it produces a huge amount of the body's neurotransmitters, including something like 90% of your serotonin.
90%, wow.
So when inflammation happens in the gut wall, it doesn't just send simple pain signals. The inflamed tissue releases these molecular messengers called cytokines.
Cytokines, okay.
And these inflammatory markers travel through the bloodstream, and they communicate directly with the central nervous system, often through the vagus nerve. This is a physical communication channel. It means that inflammation in your gut directly causes changes in your brain chemistry and function.
So wait, when people report these non-physical symptoms during a flare-up like increased anxiety or restlessness, maybe trouble concentrating, those aren't just psychological reactions to being in pain.
Yeah.
It could be a direct consequence of those inflammatory signals actually reaching the brain.
Precisely. They are reporting a direct biological effect. It's why people often describe this generalized increased anxiety or restlessness. A specific non-physical symptom we hear about a lot is worry that's centered specifically around eating.
Right.
The brain registers the physical memory of pain after a meal, and these inflammatory signals just amplify the emotional reaction to food, leading to avoidance or stress before you even take a bite.
And what about something like sleep disruption? Is that just the discomfort, or is the nervous system involved there too?
It's both. Physical discomfort certainly plays a role, but that heightened sensitivity to stress, that on-edge state caused by the circulating inflammatory markers, it makes it very difficult to get deep, restorative sleep. The nervous system is already slightly overstimulated, which makes it much harder to settle down.
This brings up such a vital question. If the mind is reacting so strongly, does stress actually cause diverticulitis? I know that's a question a lot of listeners really worry about.
It's a common and completely understandable concern. The evidence here is very clear. Psychological stress does not cause the physical development of diverticulitis. It doesn't cause the pouches to form.
Right, that's a really important clarification.
It is. However, we know that stress can significantly amplify how those symptoms are perceived and felt.
This is like turning up the volume on the pain.
Exactly. If your nervous system is already heightened by, say, work pressure or generalized worry or insomnia, the physical signal coming from the colon gets translated into a much louder, more intense experience by the brain. And understanding this helps validate the emotional response. The symptoms are not in your head. They are not imaginary. They are simply being experienced through a nervous system that's already operating at maximum sensitivity.
That validation alone is it's immensely therapeutic for people to hear. So let's conclude our deep dive by focusing on the so what of all this. The actionable benefits of applying this level of awareness. Why should you, the listener, spend time defining your personal pattern?
Well, recognizing these subtle early signals, that initial ache, that feeling of offness, it allows for a timely and crucially a calm response.
And that ability to respond calmly, that must feed back into the gut-brain loop we were just discussing.
It does. It can prevent the stress response from unnecessarily amplifying the physical symptoms. Awareness transforms the situation from a crisis into a manageable event.
It leads to a reduced sense of fear.
A reduced sense of fear, exactly, because you're now operating from a position of knowledge, not sudden
Sure.
panic. You've charted the area.
And just think about how this changes the conversation you have with your doctor. Instead of just describing a generalized stomach upset, you can deliver precise, structured observations. For the last 36 hours, I've had a dull, persistent ache in my lower left quadrant, coupled with increased tenderness after meals and a profound dip in my energy. This is a deviation from my personal baseline.
And that detailed information is just invaluable for diagnosis and getting timely support. Ultimately, mastering this early awareness builds a deep confidence in listening to your own body.
Yes.
It drastically reduces the tendency to try to push through or ignore those early warning signs until it becomes an emergency. It empowers you to trust your own internal map.
That knowledge is absolutely the goal. We've journeyed from the anxiety of the unknown through the subtle physical shifts, the intense intermediate markers, and right into these profound biological connections of the gut-brain axis. I think the core takeaway is crystal clear. Diverticulitis awareness really hinges on tracking subtle changes across 3 areas: discomfort, bowel patterns, and even your emotional state to accurately define your personal normal.
Yes.
And when that normal shifts, that is your signal.
It is. And since we established that while stress doesn't cause the condition, it significantly amplifies how we experience the symptoms. Consider this provocative thought.
Right.
If managing the anxiety and the emotional response to a flare-up can measurably alter the intensity of the physical symptoms, how much of your daily awareness is currently focused on just tracking your physical state versus being dedicated to actively building your mental and emotional resilience?
That's a deep and a very necessary question to sit with as you reflect on your personal patterns. And for those of you who are ready to move from recognition to prevention, our next deep dive will focus on identifying common flare-up triggers. We'll look at specific food patterns, overall stress levels, and various lifestyle factors to help you identify what is highly personal to your body.
That's the next logical step.
We'll continue unpacking these complex topics with clarity and calm. Until then, stay informed and listen closely to your body.